My background is I went to art college in London. I went to Central School of Art and Design, graduated with a degree in graphic design many years ago, more years ago than I care to remember. And I worked in the design industry in London, mostly working on branded packaging for about 12 years. And then I moved from the design side or the supplier side into working on the corporate side of the business. And I joined Procter & Gamble in the UK nearly 19 years ago. So I've been working a very long time. And I've been with Procter & Gamble ever since. I worked for them in the UK for 10 years. And for the last 9 years, I've been based in the US. Firstly with their hair color business, which was based in Stamford, Connecticut. And for the last 4 years in the Northeast in Boston, where I work on the Gillette business, blades and razors. So I did want to talk a little bit about, the journey of my career, and having been on the design side, having been a trained designer, and now really kind of working in a business, and what that feels like, and how that is different. And I understand that in your kind of day-to-day studies, you're really thinking about how you can bring business skills to design and design skills to business. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey and how I've kind of learned along the way. Firstly, I will say, having started in design and now being in a business where I'm using both design and business skills, it's been a very interesting journey, and I think what I love about my job, and I do love my job, and hopefully that will come across in the presentation, what I really enjoy about it is that you get to integrate both your functional mastery, which is obviously in my case design, graphic design, but also the business skills that you develop in working in a multifunctional team in a business environment. And I really like the challenge of both. I really enjoy being in a business. I enjoy understanding what the business results are. I enjoy integrating with the consumers and understanding what their needs are as we go into design. And I understand that that's some of the processes that you're learning here at college. So without further ado, I'm going to go into the case history, the Guard case history, and then I can take some Q&A afterwards. And hopefully what you'll learn, and certainly what we learned as we worked on this business, was this wasn't just about the design process and whether it was a good design, both a product design and a packaging design at the end of the day. But really what we learned to do with this particular process was about working differently. So I'm going to emphasize that in the presentation and hopefully take some questions after. So this is Guard. What is Guard? Guard is a razor that was designed specifically for the Indian consumer in India, in the Indian marketplace. And I actually have some packs with me here. I can kind of pass them around later on. So this is what this looks like. It looks very different from what you will see if you go to CVS or Target or Walmart to buy a Gillette blade. What you're probably much more familiar with is something that looks a bit like this. I actually took the razor out because I was afraid that it might get confiscated as I went on the plane today, and I didn't want to be carrying too many blades with me. But this is the thing you're probably used to seeing if you go to buy a Gillette product in all of the stores in developed markets. So consequently, something like this looks very different indeed. So really this is about the journey that helped us develop both the product and the packaging for this product. So this was actually the launch of Guard. This is actually our lobby on the Boston campus, on the Boston site. And just a few words about Boston. I work on the Boston site. It's a campus of about 1,600 people. It is one of the few multifunctional sites that P&G has. When I say multifunctional, it means manufacturing, R&D, Also the commercial functions like marketing, finance, design, market research, all on one site. That's actually quite unusual within P&G. Typically the manufacturing happens somewhere else, but in the case of Boston, we actually manufacture on site, particularly our newest launches and our kind of high-end products. And I think that actually does make a difference. It makes a difference to me, and it makes a difference to the other designers, I think, who work on the site. There is something very special, I think, about designing and then, you know, a year later, 18 months later, actually being able to go down and see your product being run on the line. So you're really, really in touch with the work that's going on. It's not like it's shipped off and all this manufacturing happens somewhere else. It's a very special site and a very special campus. So this is our Gillette Guard launch. As I said, it's got a lot of focus, both internally within the company, and in fact, our CEO is there somewhere, Bob McDonald, and also in the press as well. This case history was in the Wall Street Journal. It's been presented at different colleges, and unless about the business success, it has been a successful launch and the business has been successful, but actually more about how we approached the project and what we learned along the way and the different business model that was used to develop this. So this is what you think of when you think of a typical P&G Gillette launch. This was Proglide. This launched, I think, about 18 months ago. This is our building in Boston. This is the famous building wrap. It's been a long tradition every time Gillette launches a new product to wrap the building. So this is a sort of typical launch. You know, lots of pizzazz, lots of advertising, lots of money spent on it. And this was not the business model we used for Guard. But I really just wanted to show this as a kind of an example of how we usually think about product development and launches. There we go, that's inside. There's you know, balloons, and there was a party, and this is actually our Gillette Heritage Wall, which has a lot of our historical products on there. But Guard was something different, and here is why. This is a sort of fun cartoon. You know, you really know that you have, I don't know, you either know you have an iconic brand or you know you have a problem when people start making fun of your product. In cartoons, on Saturday Night Live, whatever. So this is, you know, typically how people think about product development at Gillette. You know, more blades, more bells and whistles, more fancy stuff. So again, this is really why Guard represented such a big change for us and a change in direction. And, you know, expense, that's another thing as well that we have to think about. You know, the assumption that people will, even in developed markets in the present economy, that people will go on spending more and more money and, you know, investing more and more in the latest, greatest, you know, better blade, more blades, sharper blades, whatever they happen to be. So this is kind of poking fun at ourselves a little bit. So Guard is really a story about serving low-income consumers. You probably saw at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about, you know, serving more men. And really the Gillette kind of promise and the way we sort of talk about it internally is serving more men and more markets more completely. And so it's really not just about the next best thing for developed markets, it's actually serving low-income consumers and recognizing that their needs may be very different. Certainly what they can afford is very different, but actually how they shop, their circumstances in which they live, you know, their kind of shaving environments, the environment in their homes, their bathrooms or whatever are going to be very, very different. So it's really starting from consumer-focused design. And really this is what kind of drove the whole premise of the work that we did on Guard. So this is one of the original Gillette products. And Gillette was actually a real person. His name, very strange name, King Camp Gillette. And he was a dreamer, a utopian. He had this idea of building sort of utopian village by Niagara Falls that could be powered by the falls. Very unusual man. And it's interesting, you know, we were talking earlier about storytelling, and this is a real story. It's actually great to work on a brand where there is a real person, there is a real story, it's really not a made-up thing. And, King Camp Gillette always focused on, serving men, giving people better products, giving people really the very best product that they could afford. So really we went into Guard with that spirit in mind. So 1 billion men. We have a desire to kind of serve 1 billion men globally. At the moment, I think it's about, 800 million men, I think, start their day with a Gillette product globally. So obviously this is not just wanting to serve people, we have a business to run as well, but we want to run a business in a way that actually improves consumers' lives. So this is our consumer, and part of this journey was really getting to understand the consumer. Gillette and Procter & Gamble in general, and in Gillette does a lot of ethnographic work, and what that means is actually going to India, if that's the market we want to go after, going into consumers' houses, spending some time with them, understanding how they use the product. Often filming them, obviously interviews, but actually watching people use the product or using what they're using today. And through that, developing what we call unmet consumer needs. So what is it that they want? What is it that they need that could make their lives better, that could make this process better for them, that currently they're not getting from products in the market, either our products or anybody else's products. So there's a huge amount of men in the world that are still using what we'll call a double-edged razor. A double-edged razor is, I actually have one here. I can pass that. Oh, here we go. Here it is. So a double-edged razor is basically one where the top kind of flips up, and you basically just put a razor blade in there and then turn it over. So this is a kind of cheap double-edged razor. This is the type of product that a guy in a developing market might be using. So I can pass that around. This, on the other hand, is a sort of historic piece. This is from our heritage wall. It's part of our kind of collection of antique razors. Is also a double-edged razor. It's very old, and you can see that the craftsmanship in this is of a different quality than what we're passing around. But essentially, the mechanics of it are exactly the same. The top lifts off, and you unscrew the top and fit a razor blade in there. So I'm going to pass this along as well. So essentially, what we discovered is that for double-edged razors, men are in developing markets this is still the primary way of shaving, or the primary kind of mechanics of shaving. And we felt that we should be able to do better than that. But we should be able to do better than that at a price that the consumer can afford and make the products accessible to them. So you can see one of Gillette's former executives said, double edge is where the prize will be. So if we can manage to get these consumers to use a better product, really there's a huge business opportunity. Because again, it's about serving men, but it's also about running a business as well. So we really felt that there was a huge business opportunity to trade people into a different way of shaving and a better product. And of course, double edge, if we think there's a huge market there, India is the largest double-edged market in the world. So to answer the question, why did we choose India? Because there's just a huge opportunity there. And again, this comes back to the point I made earlier, really, about integrating design with business reality. So designers will work with the business team to really kind of understand where are the consumers that we want to get to, and how do we then do we understand what those consumers' needs are, so that we can design a product that really suits their needs. So that answers the question, why India? It was a huge business opportunity because consumers are using a product that we really felt we could offer them something better, and there's a lot of consumers. So this is the team. I talked earlier about ethnographic work, and ethnographic work means really understanding your consumer, going to India, meeting with them, spending some time with them, interviewing them, spending times in their home, looking at how they're using their products, asking them questions, and really kind of getting to know what their lives are like. So this is our team. The project was called Himalaya. That was just a code name for the project as we worked on it. And this is them in Bangalore in October '07. So this is a 3-year journey. This team actually went to India in October '07, and we ended up launching this product in October of '10. So it's only been in the market relatively about a year. And up until this point, this product didn't exist. So the team went to India really to meet consumers, to understand what their needs were, obviously with a view to bringing them a new product. But at this time, we didn't know what the product exactly was going to be. It wasn't that we had something and we were testing it with them, or we had an idea and we were sort of seeing how receptive they were. This trip actually started with the consumer, understanding how they're living, what they're using, and what would actually make their shaving experience better for them. So if you think in that period of time, which is 3 years, what was accomplished in 3 years was we obviously designed a razor specifically for the needs of these people. We packaged it in a very different pack form than we had ever packed a razor before. We generally don't pack razors in bags, and I will come on to what gave us the idea of packing it that way. And we built a plant. So this isn't a razor that's made somewhere else and shipped into India. In order to keep the cost structure at the level that we needed it to be able to make this product affordable to these men, we built a plant so that it could be manufactured locally. So this is the team. Obviously, many people behind the scenes. These were not the only people who worked on this, but essentially this was their key focus. So this was really the core of the project team. So this is the product. I'm going to hand it around. This is the packaging, and this is the razor. I'm going to hand the Proglide packaging around as well, so you can kind of see the difference. And this is the razor. This is the Guard razor. It does have a live blade in it, so just be careful. So what we wanted to do was to realize a dream of over 40 years, to really step change how consumers, to step change this product. These guys are using a technology and a razor that essentially hasn't changed for 40 years, and we wanted to give them something new and something better, to tackle the challenges that seemed insurmountable. And the key challenge for us, there were 2 key challenges I think that at the outset of this project seemed like they were really going to be tough challenges to meet. One was to be able to develop a quality product at the cost structure that will allow men to have access to it. So it needed to be affordable for these men. So it needed to be a fraction of the price of a Mach 3 or a Fusion or some of the other key Gillette brands. And we realized we were going to have to build a manufacturing facility to be able to do this, as well as think about the product, the packaging, the merchandising, everything about it entirely differently. And we also wanted to kind of, leave a legacy. We really did want these people to have a better life and a better experience. If you actually see people shaving with a double-edged razor, I mean, it's messy. I mean, people bleed, they cut themselves. It's just not a pleasant experience. And this was what these men were kind of facing every day. So we actually did want to make things better for them. I should say a little bit about the packaging. I mean, it's interesting because I'm a graphic designer and I haven't really said very much, I think, about the design itself. I've talked much more about the process and the kind of the business model and how we kind of learned along the way. But the packaging as well, I'll just, as it's up on the screen, I'll kind of describe this. The brand is called Guard. We tested that name with Indian consumers, and it meant this is a safe product for them. Again, if you think of a typical double-edged blade, creates a lot of nicks and cuts. It's not a pleasant thing to use. And Guard actually suggested that, you know, it was a sort of protecting element. So that was something that was important. The other thing we had to communicate was that this was a product for men. This was a razor. A large number of the consumers are illiterate, so we wanted a very visual pack that would communicate that. Likewise, with the cartridge coming off, that suggests that you get refills, and the refills are here, these little sugar stick things. So this is how they buy their blades. They can be bought individually. These are perforated. So we wanted to communicate this wasn't a disposable where you use the whole thing and then you kind of throw it away. We wanted to communicate on the packaging that this was something that could come off and you would buy other ones. Price is really important. So we actually put the price on the pack. Generally, we don't do that. But in this market, for these consumers, price was absolutely crucial. So we wanted to indicate what the cost structure was. And then the colors of the pack. What we learned in talking to these men was that there is something called glow, which is the sort of a healthy-looking skin after a shave. That men who were pleased with their skin, pleased with their shave, felt that they had a sort of satisfying experience, referred to this as a glow. So we really wanted to kind of tap into that learning and again just communicate on that on the pack. The design was worked with two design firms. The the graphic design was worked with two design firms. One design firm in New York that we work with quite a bit, that understands our business, understands the blades and razor business, so very easy to work with. But we did feel it was really, really important to get kind of a local perspective on this as well. So we actually partnered them with a design studio in India, and they kind of worked in a collaborative fashion to really kind of develop this work. So at each stage, the Indian design firm was consulted in terms of colors, appropriateness, cultural aspects. We wanted to make sure we weren't doing anything that would be culturally offensive or make people not want to buy the product or buy the brand. So the Indian firm worked very closely with our studio in New York to make sure that that happened, and actually became really good partners. It was the first time we had worked with them. They became very strong business partners for us, and we're continuing to work with them. So this is the journey. We call this the Himalaya Expeditions. PE, PC, and LPA, you don't need to know those. Those are internal P&G terms that determine different milestones of our business process. And so if you think of November 2007 is when we had our first consumer immersion. That's when the team went to Bangalore to really understand the consumers, to meet with them and to meet them in their homes. And then by October 10, SOS means start of ship. So we were started to ship into the marketplace within a 3-year period. So we talked about consumer-inspired, and this is really kind of consumer-inspired innovation and consumer-inspired design. These photographs were actually taken by the team who went to Bangalore, so they're not Getty Images or something like that. And this was, these are how men are typically shaving. They will have some men don't have running water, so they will have a mug or a cup with water in it. This is, sometimes they will have a kind of a little mirror kind of propped up. Actually going to the barber shop is quite an important ritual, and many men will do that kind of on special occasions and actually be shaved by someone else. But you think, well, okay, that's how people are living. How does that actually affect how we design the product? Well, if you actually see the product that's going around, the Guard product, you'll see that it has what we call a very open architecture. That means that the space in the cartridge head, between the handle and the cartridge and the blade, is very open. And if you think of what a normal razor looks like, there's lots of blades, there's lots of stuff going on in there. That's because in a Western society, you can run that under the tap or you can have that in the shower. These guys are putting it in a mug and doing this with it. So it was important to have a very open architecture to be able to really rinse the product effectively. Because again, these guys are using shaving foam or soap on a brush. So quite a lot of foam, quite a lot of lubrication. And it was important that they were actually able to rinse the razor effectively. The other thing we did as well, and again you'll see it when you're going round, there's a hole on the end of the handle, and it's actually for hanging up. It actually creates, it really has two benefits. One is it has a practical benefit for the consumer. We can actually hang it from a hook in the bathroom, or whatever room they're shaving in. The other is it actually makes the handle cheaper because it's less plastic. So the less plastic you use in a handle, the cheaper it is for us to make it. And again, it brings the cost down to us and then ultimately to the consumer. So it actually has a dual benefit in that respect. Back to the consumer again. I mean, one of the things that we learned on this journey was that we create something called a design target. And I mean design in the broadest sense of the word. So it really helps the team, the multifunctional team, not just the designers, but the people doing market research, the finance people on the team, the engineering people on the team, to kind of have someone in mind as you're designing. And we call that person our design target. And you'll actually see, this guy wasn't, but you'll see our real design target at the end. He was a real person. The team met him and his family on the original trip. And, all the way through, it was about meeting his needs and keeping him in our focus as we actually designed, not just designed the product and designed the packaging, but even the engineers would be saying, what would he want, or how would we be able to kind of do this to kind of meet his needs. So it does actually provide a real focus and a kind of rallying cry when you have someone in mind. Quite often, a consumer profile is a composite of different pieces of learning, different pieces of research data that you might kind of pull together. And to me, as a designer, that never feels very genuine. It's more helpful than nothing at all, obviously. But the idea of actually having a real person in your sites as you do this just makes such a difference. And it created an enormous kind of focal point for the team. So he was our design target, and we actually did go back and talk to him after the razor was complete. So this is about designing, again, starting with the consumer. So, I showed you the Proglide launch at the beginning of the presentation, and I think, our business model in the past had been taking a razor, or a very best razor that had been designed typically for developed market consumers, and cost saving it, taking things away from it to make it more affordable, to make it better, to make it right for these consumers. This was a different process. This was actually starting with the consumer and a blank sheet of paper and actually building the design from the bottom up, as opposed to starting with something and stripping things away. And I think we actually got a much, much better design because of that, because it was designed with the endpoint in mind. It wasn't starting with something that we just happened to have and then constantly cost saving it and stripping it back. So this is a great example. This is Gillette Fusion Proglide and all the bells and whistles and fancy things that has. And this is Gillette Guard. And already you can see the kind of the open architecture there. It has this kind of comb device. Because again, maybe men are not shaving quite so often, so their stubble may be a little bit longer. So the comb actually presents the hair to the blade in a better way. And it's just a much simpler design. But again, it was actually starting with the consumer's needs in mind, as opposed to kind of imposing some kind of idea that we had on the consumer of what we thought that the consumer would want. We know technically from testing and all kinds of data what makes a better shave. But doing technical testing isn't the same way as interacting with the consumer and understanding what their preferences are and what things that they really, really need. So do they need a looper strip? Our razors typically have a looper strip, which actually makes the glide a little bit easier. These consumers didn't value that. It wasn't something they wanted, it wasn't something they valued. If they don't value it, then why give it to them and charge them for it? So in this case, we actually didn't give them things that they didn't value or weren't particularly wanting or asking for. And again, that enabled us to create a product that was much more suitable for this consumer and actually built in the things that they valued at a price that they could afford. So I talked about the packaging and the fact that the razor was sold in a bag, and where did that come from? Was that just a cheap way of selling it? Well, partly yes, it is much more cost effective. If you compare the bag that is going around with the Proglide pack, you can see, it's obviously a much more cost effective way to package that razor. But there's also the idea of merchandising as well. This is what we call a high frequency store. And many markets in the world, Asia, Latin America, a lot of products, or a lot of P&G products are still sold through a high frequency store environment rather than a CVS or a Walmart or something like that. And you'll see what we call the rope. And the rope is really a rope. It's a sort of, it's slung across the front of the store, and sachets are hung over the rope. So things are hung from the rope, and you can see all kinds of products. You'll see detergent, you'll see shampoo, there are toothbrushes. Just about everything you can imagine is sold from the rope. And we really felt that if we went into this market, we had to be able to sell razors from the rope. And because of that, that's why the razors come in the bags. They kind of hang up, they come in great big long strips, they hang over the rope, and the cartridges do as well. But the other thing we had to do as well, most of the products that are sold on the rope are actually products for women, or products that women are buying. So sachets of shampoo, detergent. So we realized that men who would be shopping for razors weren't even looking at the rope, whether we made the pack bright yellow, bright blue, whatever. They just weren't looking there because they weren't familiar with finding products for them in that environment. So there was, again, a whole educational piece of shopkeepers, of the guys that run these stores, to actually help them advocate for the product, so that when consumers came to the stores, they would actually advocate, they would point it out, they would really talk to them about the product and educate them in that way. So again, a very different selling model, a very different distribution model, a very different way of educating consumers than what you would typically do in a normal business environment. Again, back to designing with the consumer in mind. This is Mach 3. It has 25 total components, and here's Guard. It has 4 total components. So again, much easier to manufacture, much cheaper, much simpler. I'm not sure how many Proglide has. I actually think it's less than Mach 3. I think it's probably about between 20 and 25. But there is Guard, again, specifically designed just to be much easier to make and much more cost effective to make. So again, this is about meeting the consumer where he is. We talked about meeting his needs, about giving him what he wants, giving him what he values, as opposed to what we value and what we think he might want and what we think he might need. So again, consumer immersion is really crucial to this. And meet him where he is. So he's in villages. He's in a very different environment. He's often in very rural environments. So the guy that you can see on the right-hand side is basically our salesman. So he will kind of go to the village in a truck or a van with product, and actually, it's not just about stocking shelves. It's about educating the consumer. It's about having an event in the village or in the town to tell the consumer about the product. So again, meet him where he is. Don't expect him to change his shopping habits, change his behavior to something that we have as a kind of preconceived model in our own minds of how they should be shopping. So we have a lot of cartridges sold in, I think it was 8 months. We're now coming up to a year. I got some business update from a colleague who worked on this because I knew I was going to be doing the presentation this evening, and said, how's it going? And he said every second system razor, now system razor is where the cartridge comes off. Every second system razor sold in India today is a Guard razor. So huge, hugely successful in terms of number of consumers reached. I was talking to Heather earlier and she was saying, you know, do you regard it, or does P&G regard this as a successful launch? And I said, well, yes, absolutely. I will say I don't think we're meeting every single business metric that we had going in, but this has been a huge learning experience. There was absolutely no other way we would have learned how to design like this, how to distribute in this way, how to get the consumer learning if we hadn't gone on this journey. So I think we are, as a company, much better placed to understand low-income consumers, to understand a different business model. And the only way you can really do that, you can simulate it to some point, but the only way you can really do that is to really launch something like this. So I think that's really why the case history has been so enormously important to us as a business. It's about thinking differently, it's about designing differently, it's about the integration of design with the business model, and just a huge learning experience. And we continue to learn on this. We've been back to India, the team has been back to India multiple times. We're getting a lot of data from the marketplace in terms of what works and what doesn't. So this is very much a kind of a learning journey. And you know, you might kind of think at this stage of your careers, you know, a company like Procter & Gamble knows how to do this, they've been doing it for hundreds of years, whatever. And I will say that, you know, this was a critical learning for us and continues to be. So you never ever really stop learning, particularly as you go into some of these markets where we're less familiar with. So some of the key learnings. One, consumer inspired. Start with the consumer and design from the consumer's point of view and create a product, a pack, a merchandising model, a distribution model, an education model that actually works for the consumer. Don't give the consumer anything they don't want and charge them for it. Really start with what they need and design to that need. So design with his needs in mind, both how he's living, how he's shaving, and how he's shopping. Ruthless focus on cost. I mean, at every stage of this, because we knew we had to hit a certain price point in order to make this a viable business model for us and an affordable product for the consumer. So, you know, even to the point of building a plant, because we knew we couldn't afford to ship this in from somewhere else. So actually local resourcing was critical in this case, and we kind of knew that from very early on. And then meet him where he is. You know, if he's in a rural village and that's how he's kind of living and working, then take the product to him. Don't assume that you know, he's going to be in a large city. So this is our design target. And he was one of the consumers that the team originally met as they did the ethnographic work. And I will say that during the development of the product, the industrial designers went back several times, and actually with prototypes. So again, the importance of prototyping is crucial here. Went back to India several times and tested the product with the consumers. So it's not sort of tested in a kind of sterile environment, it's actually tested with the consumers who we want to be able to use this. And then at the end, when we actually completed the project and launched the product, we went back and met this guy and, you know, and gave him the razor that he inspired, because it really was this kind of level of inspiration that helped us to develop the eventual product. So this is back to our kind of final slide. This is our CEO in the middle, Bob McDonald, at the launch event, being kind of shown what the project was all about and kind of taken through the case history of the project. As I said, he's taken a great personal interest in this. Bob McDonald has been CEO for about 2.5 years, and he is very committed to you know, serving consumers more completely, not just men. And you know, he saw this as a key story and a key case history in actually enabling that vision for him. So that was at the launch event. So I do have a second. It's not a case history. It's more about a way of working and something that we have developed in Boston that I want to talk to you about as well. But first of all, I want to give you the opportunity to, if you have any questions about the process, the product, how we kind of thought about it, anything to do with Guard. I'd love to kind of open it up to some questions, and then I'll kind of take you on to the second piece of the presentation. I'm going to go on to the second piece of the presentation, which is completely different. It's not a case study. It's really talking about how we're working and how particularly the design function is influencing business in Procter & Gamble. So this is pretty uninspiring. This is our entrance to the Design Loft. So let me tell you what the Design Loft is. Boston, and Heather has been to the site. Boston is a very nice environment. It's a very nice site. As I said, it's a multifunctional site, which is unusual within P&G, but it is a corporate building. It's actually a beautiful old building. It was an original Gillette building, and there's some really nice spaces there, but it's a corporate environment. You know, everybody works in a cube. We have the typical, corporate carpet there that you can see the corner of. And really, the design function wanted to do something a little bit different. And we had a real incentive to do this. P&G works with an external design board. These are industry and kind of educational kind of experts on design. And they really come as an advisory board. The design function meets with them about 4 times a year. And in the 9 years that the design board has been operational, I don't think they have ever met outside of Cincinnati. So in May of this year, we offered to host the design, and many of the design board members are based in New York and Rhode Island and all over the place. They're not based in Cincinnati. So we thought there would be an opportunity in May of this year when they were scheduled to meet to actually host them in Boston, which is a great location, and they were all delighted to come. And we really wanted a space in the site that was worthy of hosting the design board, but also then could go on and be a legacy for the site and be a place where kind of people could work. So this is the entrance to the Design Loft. As you say, it's just a sort of corporate environment. And there are two spaces within the loft, and I'll just talk a little bit about this. This is what and you can see it's a real loft. I mean, it really is. It's like it's a great space, and it has views all over Boston. It's absolutely fabulous. And this is a little sneak preview. I'm not going to take you into the loft because that's where we do all of our kind of upstream work, where we do a lot of experimental work, where we think about new ideas. And so it's all kind of confidential back there. But then we have a kind of front space to the loft as well. So this is what we call our manifestation lounge. So this is our kind of male lounge. And basically it's really just a space within a very corporate environment where people can kind of hang out. You can do brainstorming, we can do presentations. In fact, we do most of our presentations to senior management, either in this space or the space behind it, where actually it operates a bit like a crit. We just like put stuff on the wall, and actually management have to walk along and look at it as opposed to sit in a chair and have a PowerPoint presentation. So this is kind of our loft space. As I said, we really created it for the meeting of the design board. That was sort of the inauguration of it. But since then it has gone on. It's a very popular kind of space for people on the site to hang out. Design maintains it, so we make sure that it's kind of clean and furnished and decorated and whatever we need to do. But the other businesses can come and work there. So HR uses it a lot, and as do some of the other teams. That's just another. It was actually relatively cheap to do. It's all IKEA furniture, mostly IKEA furniture. And we have books and artifacts and all sorts of cool things. Oh, and this is the Men in Our Lives wall. So let me talk about this. We're actually going to put this elsewhere on the site as well. And I think there is a connection here between the previous presentation, where you focus on real people as opposed to just a sort of composite of data and a sort of made-up person. So we have this ritual. When we have people come into the Design Loft, they have to start off by putting something on the Men in Our Lives pinboard. And the only thing we ask people to do is bring a story. And it can be a written story. You can see some of the stuff is written. It can be a photograph. It can be an artifact. Someone has their dog up there, whatever. And the only criteria is it has to be an artifact or a memento from a man in your life that has made a difference in your life. And it can be, and that's the only stipulation we have. It can be a father, a brother, a husband, anybody, a teacher. And people come and they tell the story, and it's literally a few minutes long, and they say, this is my father, his name is whatever. So I'm going to do my brother, actually. The bottom right-hand corner, the guy in the grey sweatshirt with the sort of pumpkins in behind, that is my brother David. So the story of my brother is, he is my younger brother. And as we grew up, there's 6.5 years between us. And as we were growing up, that's quite a big age gap, and we were never at the same stage in our lives at the same point of time. We went to the same schools, but never at the same time, because I was always leaving as he was starting. And I would say we get on very well, but we're not all that close. And that has kind of changed, I would say, over the last couple of years. My brother lives in Scotland. My parents live in Ireland. I live in the United States. So consequently, he sees a lot more of my parents than I do. My parents are getting older. That's actually a photograph of them in the middle there, Margaret and Fred. And as they have got older, my father's not very well. And my brother has spent a lot of time with them. So the story of my brother David is, he is, a kind uncle, he's a keen fisherman, he's a great brother, and as we've both got older, he has kind of taken on much more of kind of the responsible kind of son role, whereas as we were growing up, I was always the more responsible one because I was the elder of the two. So that's the kind of story I would tell about David, and he's an important part of my life, so he goes up there on the wall. But this has become a bit of a ritual. Anybody coming into the loft has to tell the story of the man in their life. And some stories are sad, some stories are happy, all kind of different things. But what it does do, because it's become this ritual of how we work and how we work in this space, it really has, it just makes men real. And that's a kind of strange thing to say, but I think when you're working on a business like Gillette and you're talking about men and demographics and different countries and how they operate and whatever, it's very easy to think of this, to think that this is like some other species. And I think this really connects us to the men in our lives, and it connects us to the consumers that we're trying to serve. So this has just been a very, very powerful way of working for us, and it's something that we're using across the business. So that was and again, it comes back to the power of design and what design can do. And I know, many of you are studying design at the moment, and the integration of design and business. And never forget that designers, I do think, have a knack of seeing things differently. And I think you can often bring not just packaging design or product design, as we talked about in the Guard experience, to the workplace, but you can actually bring different ways of looking at things, different processes, different ways of telling stories. So design has a huge role, I think, in a business environment, much beyond what your particular skill set and mastery can bring. And it's much more of a kind of cultural intervention, I think, you can bring to a business organization. So worth bearing in mind as you develop your careers. And one of the things that we did in our Loft space, Old Spice is one of our brands as well, by the way. And one of the things that we did in our Loft space was focus on new ideas. So really this is a place where the design function can play. They can actually lead, I believe, the business to new ideas, to new ways of thinking about things. So in this particular environment, I do believe that ideas are born executed. And here's where we get to play, here's where we get to execute some things, put them out there, and actually bring the business round. So we had this was an installation. We brought the business leaders round. We said, we've been talking about this kind of idea for some time, but here we've actually executed it. We have packs, we have print ads, we have products. They're made up, they're invented. And quite often the eventual products may not end up looking like these things, but it's a way of starting the conversation. And again, I think that's something that design can uniquely bring to even a very established business like Procter & Gamble. And we use this technique across multiple businesses. This is not something I would claim to own just in the male grooming environment and in Gillette. It's something we do across the businesses. So I think that kind of concludes both the Guard story and a little bit about how we're kind of working, thinking about design, integrating design into a business environment, integrating design into a corporate culture, and the role that design can play.